says Pitchfork revisited Stillmatic's album and now gave him a 9.1 rating. Um, it says the here got too much. I guess the people got too much for them. The heat got too much for them. That's what he meant. Listen, did you see that? Because one of our, I don't know if it was Vernon, but one of our followers actually sent us the review. And I saw that they did that a couple of weeks back, but I never looked at it. But I think they were piggybacking off of our conversation about Billboard's top 10 and how they use Nas's time to speak to Jay. Well, they did the same thing in this article. They went, this Stillmatic article, let me pull it up real quick. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the research that I did after, after the fact. Now, they gave it a 9.1, but this article's about Jay-Z once again. So I'm just going to start it off because it's a very, very long article. It says, in the summer of 2000, at Music Mogul Steve Stout's birthday party in New York, Nas and Jay-Z ended up in an unexpected, tense conversation about the state of hip-hop. The pair had never exactly been friends. After growing up in the project houses 5 miles and a borough apart, the rappers met in the early 90s on tour, including Jay's mentor, Jazz, and main source. The group had introduced Nas to the public with an ancillary guest feature on 1991's Live at the Barbecue. Nas popped out rapping Stuffing Jesus. Jay would play the hype man for Jazz. Blah, blah, blah. Let me get down here real quick. All right, with an astonishing 1994 debut album, Illmatic, Nas was anointed the savior in certain strand of formalistic autobiographical rap. 2 years later, Jay released his own debut, Reasonable Doubt, on his label that he co-founded with Biggs and Dame. Nas was supposed to be the heir apparent on Reasonable Doubt to Bring It On, but according to Dash, kept flaking on the schedule, recording sessions. This is the review for Stillmatic. So anyway, they go on and on. They keep talking about Jay. I can even go down a little bit more. It says Jay started by throwing his own people under the bus. He said that his protege, Memphis Bleak, was a big fan of Nas. Okay, well, this is going back into some articles or whatnot. Anyway, so I ran this article through WordPress. Not WordPress, what am I talking about? Microsoft Word. And you know how you can find out how many times a individual word is mentioned in an article? I looked up to see how many times Jay-Z was mentioned in this article, and it was 44 times. Nas' name in his own review was mentioned 69 times. How is another artist's name mentioned in your album review 44 times? Come on, Pitchfork. We got to stop this, man. I guess that's the new play. Now that, they got called out for the whole Illmatic thing and always bringing that up, now it's time to start talking about Jay whenever it's time to talk about Nas. I think with this show coming up and with this series that has solidified Nas in his spot, he's number one. It is what it is. Anybody who is saying otherwise is honestly not being objective. Let's just be completely honest here at this point. What needs to happen in hip-hop, man, we need to stop mentioning Jay-Z, as it concerns Nas. Nas's career stands alone. Now, if you want to do a full biographical take on the two and mention that small window in their career, fine. But at the end of the day, there's no reason to mention Jay-Z when you're talking about Nas. He's done way too much. 44 times, Coop? 44 times. 44 fours, man. But yeah, 44 times. 444. Jay-Z is mentioned in this album. And this album review, excuse me.
Well, it's very problematic, obviously, that in an article that is actually supposed to be correcting a musical injustice of sorts. So the fact that this review is even tethered with the fabrics of Jay Z that much it is problematic. Like truly, I'm
Yeah,
not saying that like tongue in cheek. I'm saying that like for what the word and the connotation of it actually means. And this is once again an example of how media really tries to help and control the narrative. I think you made a very astute observation when you're saying it's like, well, they're really just trying to divert the path. Now it's like, well, now we can't talk bad about Illmatic, so let's just bring up Jay as much as we possibly
right.
can and try to make it seem like that this man's career is centered around him usurping Jay's status, or at least
Exactly.
attempting to.
Exactly.
And,
And the thing is, man, it's not like he didn't have other things going on during the creation of this album. He just lost his mother. You know what I'm saying? So I think that the fact that the article didn't start off there and start off with the fact that, okay, these are the things that were going on with this artist at the time of the conception and the creation of this project, as opposed to just, boom, we're going to just start with Ether. I mean, it's the same thing that the people at Billboard did. And I'm sure that the Jay-Z fans in the chat, and I'm a Jay-Z fan myself, are going to sit here and say, yo, man, you guys are reaching, blah, blah, blah. They just did the same thing with Billboard. Were we reaching when Billboard put Nas at number 3 and didn't say anything about his career and just talked about Ether? It went from Ether, he won a Grammy, move on to Kendrick at 2. This is something this is planned. And they got to stop that, man.
it is. I mean, it's a, if people really understand what propaganda means. I know
Right.
when people
This
when
is
we
legit
actually
propaganda.
like when people like when we you have to understand that that word unto itself is considered to be controversial and considered to be propaganda has officially become a word that if you use it you're officially like a conspiracy theorist. You get what I'm saying?
Right.
So it has a bad skew overall as a word now. But plain in sight, when we are talking about how this is propaganda and yellow journalism, this is what we are talking about because it's like, well, hold on, you're re-rating the album. Why are you re-rating the album talking about a Nas and Jay-Z conversation in a nightclub? What does that have to really do with Stillmatic at all? Because if I'm not mistaken, Stillmatic is about 15 songs deep, and you pretty much centered an entire review, not just around one record, but an entire few that we're already aware and privy to. You know,
Right.
and it's just like, how many times are you going to play that card now? And and the plug is the one that kind of told me, it's like, well, you know, when you mention, and that's why we stopped doing it here, at least on my part too. It's like, well, when you put Jay and Nas in the same sentence, that really helps Jay more than it helps Nas, and that's what this propaganda side of it. It's like, well, actually, they're big upping Jay and who Jay is by mentioning him so much in an article with somebody who is as equally, if not more important than him in this culture.
Exactly. And the thing is, as Dame Dash said on the Breakfast Club, when they talk to Jay, they don't bring up Nas. So don't do it the other way around. You know what I mean? Like,
Right. Because
if
you don't have to talk like you don't have to talk about Ether at all for this man to have like an incredible career.
he's already made the statement, and I don't know if Jay's made the same statement, but he doesn't perform Ether anymore. It's not even part of his catalog at this point. So, and
It's
honestly,
not.
it's not one of the stronger songs on Stillmatic. Like to even, it's two things. You know, I think that the media is fascinated with, you know, hip hop beefs, right? That's one thing. But what makes it very one sided is the fact that whenever Jay is talked about, this quote unquote beef is never mentioned. So the propaganda side of it is positioning it in a way where it's almost like this was something that was in play to benefit Nas. That's not what it was. It was just two MCs, you know, getting on record, going back and forth. That's happened before. But to actually only speak of it whenever we mention Nas's career, that's to put it, that's to say without saying that that was a come up for him. You know what I mean?
Well, this is okay. So this is what people I think, and this is why I don't like. This is me personally why I don't like the Ether talk. I think you make another astute observation, Mike. First of all, I don't think that the Takeover or Ether, respectively, are top 5 songs on those respective albums. Do you?
I don't, especially in Ether's case. Takeover, it's closer, but no, I don't. Because I think You
Okay,
Don't Know's
so
better. I think that Heart of the City's better. I think
right,
Song Cry is better.
right.
Just off the top.
I think okay.
Takeover's a
Go ahead.
strong song, though. So, I mean,
I think All I Need is better,
you think All I
and I
Need's
think
better than
Mama.
Takeover? I don't
I
know.
think Mama Loves Me is better. I think Lyrical Exercise is better.
I don't know. I don't know about those.
I love
It's
Lyrical Exercise. I think that's the most underrated beat on that album, actually.
I love
But
the Doors sample. You know what I'm saying?
no, I feel you. I think you're
Yeah.
talking about the beat too.
Yeah, just
I
the
think some of
complete,
that is about what you prefer.
yeah.
Um, but I say that to say that, well, Nas needed a Stillmatic more than he needed Ether. You feel what I'm saying?
Correct.
He needed an album
Yeah.
that sounded the way that Stillmatic sounded more than he needed Ether. Like if this never happens and Ether's not on Stillmatic and you just like take track 2 out and then put the rest of it together, oh, the talk is still the same about the album, because when you talk about the greatness of the album, you're not really talking about Ether. You're
You're right.
talking about the intro. You're talking about You're the Man. You're talking about Rewind and One Mic and The Flyest and What Goes Around. You're not really talking about Ether like that when you're talking about the moments on the album that kind of like made it a quote unquote comeback of sorts.
You're
Like,
right.
he didn't need Ether for it to be a comeback album. He needed Stillmatic to sound like Stillmatic sounded outside of Ether.
You're right. You're right. Because if he would have put out Ether and the rest of the album was Nostradamus, then that wouldn't have
That
helped
wasn't
him.
gonna cut it.
Yeah.
Mm-mm. That
CJ
wasn't gonna cut
Kidd.
it.
CJ Kidd with the super chat says, I recently saw another GIP video of him straight launching meteorites at Jay, to which I think it went a little bit far. Wonder what Jay did to him. This is the thing, man, and I think that we only deal with this when it comes to Jay and criticism and things of that nature. I'm a Jay-Z fan myself, you know what I mean? I think he's one of the greatest ever. He's top 3 to me. But if somebody said something like, look, I don't really get into the hustler talk. If mostly what your talk is about selling drugs, and I'm more into KRS, and I'm more into people who do other things, I can't knock that. That's just his opinion. And I think again, like, oh, go ahead.
No. I'm sorry. I want you to finish.
No, I was just going to say, kind of like what we said in the previous episode, I think that Big Gip was around before Jay, and he remembers what it was like before he came along, and, what he sounded like before the rest of us heard him, and he has a different viewpoint. He was in the room, like you said.
Well, that's why I've always told people, it's like, no, objectively, you can I can put Jay at number 2 and enjoy his music. And Mike, he still tops like 6 or 7 to me on a personal level. So it's not like, oh, I'm saying objectively he's number 2, but personally I have him at 17.
Right.
No, that's not what's going on. He's still like high amongst the highest, but for me, as somebody who's a big fan of Biggie, a big fan of Tupac, and a big fan of Nas, and was a hip-hop fan of music around that time, literally from about 92, 93, 94, 95, before he even came along, like really, outside of the In My Lifetime. I remember when In My Lifetime, Volume 1, the actual little single with the little champagne bottle on it and stuff, I remember when all that dropped and all that. Like, I was already ahead by then. So it's like, for me, I kind of feel the way Gip feels about it. Is like,
I understand it.
But and it's okay to feel that way without it being disrespectful, because it's like, no, I remember when they was all outside. On a good day, he was 4th. On a good day, he was 4th when they were all outside.
When
so
everybody
in my
was
mind,
outside.
It's hard for me to forget that competitively.
Right. No, that's fair.
And
it's like, let's put it in NBA terms. Let's put it in NBA terms, right? Let's just say.
I was just about to, but go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I want to see the players.
No. Go ahead. Go ahead and run.
So let's just say we got Bird, Magic, Jordan, and say Olajuwon or something, right? We know who was who and everybody was active. And let's just say somehow two guys drop off the face of the earth, and the other guy continues to go on a consistent pace, and people are saying, yo, he's the greatest ever. And I'm like, no, well, when all four of them were there, he was a distant fourth.
Right. I was actually I wasn't gonna go Olajuwon. I was actually gonna use the same analogy, Mike, and I was gonna go Isaiah. It's like and think about this. This is what I'm saying. I still think Isaiah is the best little man that ever played the game. And I still think he's a top 20 player. You feel what I'm saying?
Right.
When I mean top 20 player, actually, Mike, no. Isaiah Thomas is still a top 15 player all time in my eyes. Because he got 2 rings when Bird, Magic, and Mike was outside.
Yeah.
They were outside. He got 2 rings. He's 6 feet tall, Mike. He had a season where he averaged, I think, 20 points and 14 assists. In 1985, he averaged 20 points and 14 assists.
He's a bad
That's
man.
never going to happen again, okay? You're never going to see a point guard do that again. Nobody's ever going to average 20 and get that many assists again, okay? So he's all-time legendary. Now sit him next to Mike and Larry and Magic in like 88, 89, 87, right. Just like his players. It's like, no, he's not as good as them.
Yeah.
And as much as he would hate to admit it, he would probably tell you that. That's why his accomplishment is so great. And so it's okay to hold somebody high, and it's not any disrespect if he's not number one. Because for me, somebody who's from the South, well, I do prefer to listen to Scarface music more than Jay music. And somebody that's a big Wu-Tang fan, a lot of the time I prefer to hear Ghostface. Mike is somebody that really, if you want to really talk about what Jay is famous for, which is that talk. Well, Mike, why you think I hold Ray so high and tell you Ray's top 10?
Yeah.
When Jay's talking Meyer Lansky on American Gangster in 2009, how does Glaciers of Ice start off in 95? Rap Meyer Lansky, Crash Your Fantasy. So Ray on that street talking, if you look up Meyer Lansky, for those of you who aren't aware, Ray was talking Cristal a year before Jay was talking Cristal.
Let me get to these super chats. Chris Scott with a $20 super chat. Appreciate the love. Says, gentlemen, it's always a pleasure to be on the platform. Two brothers doing great things for the culture, and I salute you. Enjoy the show Friday from the greatest MC of all time. Appreciate the love, Chris. Appreciate you stopping by. Oh man, Leroy Green has a super chat. I'm looking forward to seeing what this is. It says, Leroy Green says, Ether is Nas' most talked about record post 96. Talked about by whom? That's our point.
Right. That's our point.
Not by us.
It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. Right. Nobody should be really talking about the record if we're talking about
the media.
I think this is what I'll tell you. This is one of those totality conversations. Well, in the totality of all things for a diss record and for what the competitor was and for the stature of the competitor at the time of the competitor, you could say it's the greatest diss record ever. Now, I'll tell you it's top 3 because I think just as a pull-off, I prefer The Bitch and You and No Vaseline.
Yeah.
But outside of it being easily a top 3, it definitely should be on everybody's top 5 diss record list. Outside of it being an easy top 5 diss of all time, it's what should it be other than that?
Right.
Which you could also argue that The Takeover is as well.
I agree. CJ Kidd with the $20 super chat. Appreciate the love. He says, I don't know if you guys did this, but if you guys did Reasonable Doubt versus Stillmatic track for track real quick, I would wonder, will Stillmatic... he said, "Will Still would be fair." I wonder how well Still would fare. Okay, I'm sorry, how well Still would fare. No agenda here. Just curious on the matchup. I mean, we could do that. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what's the track count looking like.
I mean, we know Reasonable Doubt is 14 records, right?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, off the top of my head, I think Reasonable Doubt would get that, but Michael Williams with the super chat. We can explore it. It says, if you had to make the ultimate KD compilation album with 15 songs, what would it be? Only criteria is you have to use at least 3 songs from each KD. Well, hold on. 15 songs, 3 songs? Oh, at least 3 songs. Okay. I have to go through the track list, but yeah, it'll end up being a great album. I know that.
From the first one, I would take Blue Benz, 27 Summers, and Spicy.
Okay.
Off top, just to do a quick 3 off KD2, I would take Death Row East and Store Run and Nobody. Yeah, that's right. We're putting Death Row East on there.
Yeah, I knew that was
Oh,
coming.
you need some Death Row East in your life. And for KD3, I would take Legit. I would take Mike and Quincy, and I would take WTF SMH. Just off the top, I would take those. I would take those 9 records right now, and I
Give me
would parse out
Reminisce,
the rest.
man. I love Reminisce.
But we starting off with Death Row East. That's the first song that's playing, Mike. That's the intro music. We're gonna play Death Row East first, then we're gonna work our way down.
Leroy Green with the $10 super chat. He says, "Let's have a lyrical exercise. Nas signed a record deal as a teenager, never having to survive the dark side of the streets," he described. Jay details lyrically is based on experience. You don't feel like Nas is based on experience as well? His man got killed, man.
I mean,
my man was shot for a sheep coat.
Well, here's the thing about it, and let's just speak to this. I mean, I've never been to New York, Mike. This is actually going to be my first time going.
Really? Oh,
so I don't know.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I've never been.
That's gonna be fun then.
I've been around
New York's
the world,
gonna show you a good time. Union
right.
Square.
Every time I tell people that, they're like, you of all people, like for everywhere you've been. I'm like, yeah, never been to New York City, but I imagine, Mike, I've been to Baltimore. I've been to Youngstown and Dayton, Ohio. I've been on the west side of Charlotte, east side of Atlanta. I've been to Compton, Mike.
Respectfully, though, there's nothing like New York. Like I love.
No, but
all
I get
of
it. But
those
it's
places,
like when you come from when you come from a certain type of area, Mike. What I'm saying is like, oh, everybody gonna see and do and go through shit. You do understand that, right? It is part of what has traumatized us as people of color in this nation, quite frankly.
Well, what's different about New York is the fact that people are living on top of each other. Like, I was talking to my homeboy the other day about the Queensbridge projects and just how structurally these things are built. They're built damn near like, prison yards. Prisons. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it's different.
It's institutionalization.
It's different. It's very different.
Institutionalization.
Because at least, what I'm saying, like in the hoods, at least in Atlanta and, even out west, people got their own space. You know what I'm saying? You got space. These people are living on top of each other like 30 stories up. It's crazy. It's very different. I would say that. Leroy Green with the super chat also says, you both quote Jay more than any MC because the writing is more intricate and it's deeper than just drugs. You hear the context with life. Yeah, I agree. I mean, and that talk and that ambition that Jay comes with, it's different, man. Like, that's why I wrote an article saying that Reasonable Doubt is the most ambitious album ever. And he executes on that.
I don't know if we quote him the most, though. I don't find that to be true.
I think it probably just resonates when we quote him with Leroy, probably, I hate Leroy missed the Tupac and Jay matchup that we did on Patreon. I mean, let me know if I did a good job representing Jay, Leroy, man. I thought I did pretty good. We'll go through that in a second, too. CJ Kidd with the super chat says, too far. I'm talking about with the Git mentioning Beyonce. Criticizing Jay's work is fine, but he took some personal shots from what I remember. I do think that the Beyonce thing is too far. I get his point, but I think when you start bringing in outside things, it comes across as something else. But again, the biggest thing here is I think anybody who was outside and was around when Big and Pac were around, and Nas.
And Snoop.
We would have to ask ourselves, let's just say in a vacuum, right? We know what Jay's run looked like. What does that run look like inserting him into 1995, 1996? Does it supersede what we saw with what Tupac was doing, what Big was doing with the One More Chance remix and having Kick in the Door and having, Who Shot Ya and all of that stuff? Like, does it stand with that level of star power? Because I think one of the interesting matchups we had in our verses when you played California Love, I thought, okay, well, I could play Empire State of Mind because they're both anthems for respected cities, states in that situation. But I was like, no, it's a quality issue. I think we all know California Love's a better song than Empire State of Mind. So I just went the club banger route and I played Give It To Me up against California Love. Give It To Me didn't win that. At least that's what I see right now. It was close at first. You think California Love's better than Give It To Me?
I don't even think those records are in the same stratosphere.
You think?
Because here's the thing. This is what I mean about being outside for something. It's like, okay, what's Jay's biggest record to you?
Well, that's where I was gonna go. I was gonna go on a banger, from a banger standpoint. And I think from a club standpoint, and the record that we hear the most now, like if you go out right now or go to somebody who's gonna play like some, throwback hip hop mix or whatever, I think "Give It To Me" is the record you're probably gonna get the most.
Okay, right.
Is that even better than "I Get Around"? You think?
Well, that's my prop. Okay, so let's unpack that right.
Okay.
Quick. Okay, so California Love for me is maybe if it's one of Pac's 20 best songs, it's one of his. It's not one of his 10 best songs. It's one of his 10 biggest songs. You understand that?
Gotcha.
So
I would say the same thing about
"Give
"Give It To Me" for Jay, though. I would say the same thing about "Give It To Me" for Jay.
Right, but this is what I mean. So this is them in both in hit-making single mode.
Mm-hmm.
California Love was a moment, Mike. Do you remember when Pac was getting out of jail, how people felt about that?
Yeah.
And how big that was? This is what I mean about, like, everything that people associate, like with Jay, the momentum, the stature, the status, the hoopla, the everything that comes that doesn't even necessarily involve the music, that's Pac. But Pac made the better record, too. You feel me? So it's like, how is it? And that's what I mean. Is it's like, well, I can't put Jay over Pac in my mind on a personal level because it's like, no, I saw that happen. Like, he never made a song like California Love that people even felt that way about. On top of the fact that this man had Keep Your Head Up, I Get Around, and Dear Mama, and So Many Tears and Temptations before California Love, Mike. Those were all records that everybody swore by and played and were used.
What do y'all think is the better record? "Give It To Me" or "California Love"? Because I'm still thinking about it. Leroy Green with the super
Only
chat
in
says,
Cali will we riot, not rally. To live and die in LA, we wearing Chucks, not Bally.
Leroy
Ooh.
Green with the super chat says, it's not Jay's fault that Big and Pac died before his debut.
It ain't our fault that he wasn't as hot as them when he dropped his best album.
They didn't die before his debut, though.
He made his best album while they were around.
Right. Yeah, that's just not the truth. But
That's not the
007 with the super chat says, Leroy Green sending super chats, and they all false. Nas must be performing at the Garden soon. Can y'all touch briefly on the NYMC's importance today? Oh yeah, we're gonna get to that because we're gonna talk about how Friday's gonna go, what to expect, and what songs you think are gonna get played.